Alright, for this video I'm going to include two things. One, just how to sharpen the blending stick, and then the other thing I'm going to show you is how to create a small value scale. So with the blending stick, you might get a blending stick where it's kind of peeling apart. If it is, just use a piece of tape and tape it down. And then you look at both sides of the blending stick. One side, if it's a little bit dirty, you'll use 220 grit sandpaper. And you're not going to press really hard, you're just going to press lightly. And then go from left to right just to clean off those sides. If it's on the tip, you can do that. If little hairs or pieces of fiber stick up, just pull those off. But anyway, you want to clean off both sides of that blending stick by sanding it. Make sure as you do that that it's dry, and also hang on to that piece of sandpaper so that you can use it at a later time. Now with the little pieces of paper that I gave you, we're going to divide it up into 6 different sections, and we want to add some pencil lead going from lightest one to the darkest. So first I'm going to divide up the area into 6 sections. I'll use a pen, and I'll use that skinny ruler that I gave you earlier for that. If you don't have that, just remember you're dividing a piece of paper into 6 sections. Now if I use this ruler and draw a line down the side, I can go 1 ruler width and then divide that paper again. So with your papers, now I'm also not speeding up anything in this video, that way you can do it with me, and then as you need, pause the video so that you can catch up with whatever step that is that I'm on. So again, I'm just doing slightly larger than the width of my ruler. Alright, now I have 6 equal sections, or pretty close to equal sections. Then I'm going to number each of these sections, starting on the left side with 1. Here's just a closer view. Now the number 1 area, we're going to leave pretty blank. We'll add a little bit of color to it, but we're going to start with pencil on the number 2 area. And we're going to hold our pencil a little bit differently than we normally do. Instead of holding it like we write, we're going to either hold it underneath our hand, or we're going to hold further back on the pencil so that more of the pencil lead is touching the paper. So there you see how I'm holding it underneath my hand. That way more pencil lead touches the paper. And then with this number 2 area, I'm going to draw really lightly, but I kind of want to make an even coating of pencil lead throughout the entire section. So now there's a difference in color between, or I guess not color, but a difference in shade between 1 and 2. Now I can go over the 3rd area. One thing to keep in mind is if you get pencil lead on your fingers, that will create marks on your paper. So I'm going to try and not put my fingers on those really light areas. And then to make an area darker, I can either press harder or I can go over it more times. So in this case, I'm going over it a few more times than normal. Then I get to the 4 area. I'm going to go over that. And then I noticed, oops, I'm getting some pencil lead on the board. You might do that on your table. You might get pencil lead on your table. So to prevent that, just grab a sheet of scratch paper or a piece of paper that you're not really using, maybe a starter paper. Put that underneath, and then you can continue. So notice I still have the pencil underneath my hand as I'm making these marks. And then the harder you press, when you go over the edges, it can move the paper, but that's okay. Now this number 5 area, I am putting more pressure down on the paper. And then when I get to 6, I put even more pressure down on the paper. And after I do that first coat, I realize, and you'll see me do this a couple times, I realize it's not dark enough, so I have to rotate the pencil in my hand, and then I go over it just to darken up that area. And I might have to do this a few times. Now remember, just pause the video so that you catch up to where I'm at. And then play the video so that you know what to do after this point. The camera doesn't pick this up really well, but with your drawings, just make sure that there's a distinct difference between each two. So like the 1 and 2, if I were to cover up the sides, it helps me focus on just those two tones, and then I can say, oh, is one darker than the other? So like between 3 and 4, they're pretty close. So I can always add more to the number 4. So I just go over adding another layer of pencil, trying to make sure that it's uniform throughout. Now when I cover up the 2, there is a distinct difference, so I can move on to the next one. But because I darkened the 4, I now need to darken the 5. And I can still darken the 5 because the 6 is super dark. And also I can add a little bit more lead to the number 6 area. Right now when I compare number 4 and number 5, there is a big difference, or a distinct difference. But when I compare 5 and 6, there's not quite a big difference now. So I'm going to go over holding the pencil straight up and down, or not straight up and down, but at a sharper angle. And I'm going to go over that section just to darken things up a bit. Now with this, normally I move the pencil in the same direction, but with this last section, I can move the pencil doing strokes in different directions. All right. Now that they're pretty uniform, I'm going to be able to use my blending stick. I'm using a clean blending stick. When I start off spreading around the pencil lead in that first area, I want to make sure I have a clean blending stick. If I don't, if there's a lot of lead on there, it might leave additional marks, right? And so I just am doing vertical strokes, and then it's a little bit easier if you rotate your paper, but then I'll do horizontal strokes so that they're going in different directions so that the color's really blending. And then the number 1 area, we don't want it to be just plain white. Instead, we want a little bit of shading on there. So I'll put my blending stick in the 2 area, rub that around. A little bit of pencil lead will get on my blending stick, and then I'll move that pencil lead onto the number 1 area. Once it looks uniform and there's very few lines, then I can move on to the next shade, in this case the number 3 area. All right, going in both directions. When you do this, you're really just spreading the lead over the entire surface of the paper. And when you spread that lead over the entire surface, it will slightly darken it. It will look a little bit darker because more of that white paper is getting covered up. But it should darken up pretty equally throughout each tone. And when you're doing this, if you realize, oh, one area needs to be darkened a little more, you can always add pencil lead. That's totally fine. And this should be a little bit easier for you to do It looks like it's not working out totally well on the camera, but that's just because the lighting keeps changing when I have my hands in the view of the camera versus when they're away. I don't get to change the light balance on the document camera I'm using. When you get finished with yours, I have a pre-made one that I'll use to compare the tones to. We're all using the same exact pencil. You should be using a Ticonderoga pencil. That's the ones we're using in our art class. So if you have a different pencil, that's totally fine. Just make sure that there's a distinct difference between each two, and then when you're done, I like to punch a hole in each section, and then I can use this and put it over my drawing to identify, oh, I need to make that a 3 or a 4 or 5. So let me show you on the printout of my face. Alright, so if I look at that shadow, I might initially think it's a 2 or a 3, but then when I compare it with my little swatch, you'll see it's even darker than the darkest color I can get with my pencil. So we're going to use some special pencils, some HB pencils, just basically some pencils that will be a little bit darker, and we'll get those really dark areas. But we're going to use our regular Ticonderoga, or whatever you call it. We're going to use that pencil to get the majority of the shading done. All right, and then we'll watch the next video when you're ready for seeing all of the steps.